Hello, and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most newest work as it releases. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And it's good to talk to you again, Elliot. We haven't spoken in 4 months?
Oh, it's been so long.
Many years.
I barely remember which way is up anymore.
I barely remember which one of us is Reuben Morehouse and which one of us is Elliot Diebold. We're here. We're back from our award-winning show Deep Impact to talk about Pale, which is another show set in the Wildbow Otherverse universe. We should point out here, if you're new to the show, we're explicitly not going to be discussing packed spoilers. This is going to be, as Pale is, a completely packed spoiler-free zone. We might do some special packed spoiler sections towards the end of each episode, but those will be clearly delineated. Apart from that, you can come into this completely fresh.
Yes, and similarly, if you're going to be joining in on our Reddit threads and all that jazz, no packed spoilers in any of those.
Yeah, spoiler tag any packed things. Yeah.
Especially, I don't know, I've noticed quite a few of you who've read Pact, there's a lot of things in the world that aren't yet explicit in Pale, so please be careful about, world building stuff that you're referencing, because it may not be common knowledge for Pale readers.
Yes, we do have at least one listener I know of by name who is listening along to this and has not read Pact, which is a bit wild. And to that person I say, go read Pact, it's pretty good. And while you do that, listen to our previous show, Deep Impact. But if you're not going to do that, that's fine. Should we get on with it? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we're going to be covering 2 chapters here, I guess. The first chapter is the Prologue, 00 Blood Run Cold, and the second chapter is the brochure for experiencing Kennet.
Yeah, more like one chapter and a little
one and
bonus.
A bit chapters, yeah. I guess we'll talk about the bonus when we get to it, but I think that's such an exciting thing that's happening. Oh, also, we're covering another bit, which is the About page. I mean, does this count as a chapter? It's got stuff in there that I think is worth us covering. We're actually going to be talking about the About page first, so if you haven't read that, you should go read it, because it basically introduces 3 or 4 key concepts that are going to be very useful for us to be able to reference.
Yeah, it feels so weird to be covering the About page in this way, but it's written so fantastically, and it has some really important info, as you said.
Yeah.
So we actually did feel like we really wanted to cover it, if for no other reason that it introduces a few words that we were going to struggle to avoid using being Pact readers. So yeah, we're very excited to, I guess, just get into it and start in, I guess, where everyone should start. It's effectively the blurb that would be on the back of the hard copy.
You take a look at the back of the book, you read this, and then you think, wow, this is awesome, I got to read it. So basically the About page, the plot of it, I suppose, is it's discussing the 3 kind of broad ways that you can get caught up in the practices, which seems to be some kind of magic. First is you can get born into it. Families seem to have bloodlines of practices. The second is you can stumble into it by finding a lightener in your local library or something. And third, the oldest and seemingly most dangerous way is you can meet a magical creature. And this seems to be the path, or no, it seems to be, it's explicitly said to be the path that we are taking in this story.
Yeah, and what I love about this About page is it could have just been a bit of an information dump, like, the practices are magic. But it's written so evocatively. Like, it doesn't say there's magic. It says, there are esoteric traditions that predate computers and even paper and bronze.
That allow you to, control the wind or whatever.
Yes, you can make the wind listen to you or exchange your skin for that of a serpent.
Okay, just hold on. Why is that an example of something that somebody would want to do? I want to talk about that first of all, because make the wind listen to you. That's interesting. And the third one is, you didn't say it, but call forth the sorts of monsters that appear in horror movies. And I'm like, okay, that's not a great thing to do, but presumably it's something you could do as a weapon, stick them on your enemies. But exchange your skin for that of a serpent. I'm really struggling to think in what situation that would be useful. But I do love that it sets up the concept of you're not getting thicker skin or anything. You're exchanging your skin for that of a serpent. And it's very specific wording that kind of implies that the inherent monkey's paw that's probably baked into these kind of exchanges.
Yeah, you're right. I think the word exchange was chosen very deliberately.
Yeah.
Because you're right. That just implies that you're paying a price for it, and that's something particularly the end of the about page goes into, that there's costs associated with this stuff. But I just love how much flavor there was in this about page. Like, it could have just been like, there's magic, and there's 3 ways you can get into it, and
don't worry about the first 2, we can talk about the third one, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, like, there's all these examples, and it's just written in such a way that just made me go, man, there's so much to this.
Yeah, so one of the things I did as we were starting was I went back and read each of the about pages for each of Wildbow's other works, and it does feel significantly different to them, even including Pact, but all of them. It's a lot more, like, full of prose, whereas the others seem to be, and maybe it's just because Wildbow has evolved as a writer over time, but they seem to be kind of descriptions of what you can expect in the story, whereas this one is very, like, it feels like it's it feels like you're doing the second way. Like, you've accidentally stumbled across a book in a library, and that book is Pale, and you're kind of getting sucked into this world of magic through this about page. That's what it feels like to me, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I like that.
I wanted to again touch on these 3 examples of, like, magic, I guess, that are discussed, because I'm one of the other reasons I went back through each Wildbow work was to see if the about pages referred to specific powers. Like, if in the Worm about page, Worm's a story about superheroes, it said, oh, and your superpower might be this, and then we meet that character later on in the story. None of them do that. None of them make explicit references to any, like, specific abilities, so I'm not sure if these are ones that are going to be incorporated later, or they're just examples, but I kind of am hoping to see some character that can exchange their skin for that of a serpent, just to understand more about why they would do that.
So you're getting your theorizing tinfoil hat on early for this cast.
Yeah, I mean, when we did our previous show, you were the one who hadn't read Pact before, and I had, so I couldn't really theorize. Now I'm like going gung-ho on all my theories out of the gate.
Yeah, no, I tried to think on this after I saw you'd written that. The best I could come up with is it was, like, references to other things, like making the wind listen to you. That's Avatar, the last Airbender.
Yeah, maybe airbending, yeah.
Harry Potter for the exchanging your skin for a serpent. I don't know if there's another one for the third example of the horror movies, but that feels
Cabin in the Woods, maybe?
Yeah. I don't know, like, that feels like I'm just making that up. I think it's just a set of vivid examples Wildbow probably came up with.
Yeah.
Just to make you go, what the fuck?
Yeah, knowing Wildbow, I'm sure these are powers that he has thought about, and probably, like, if included, they're going to be very minor, but he's got full fleshed out, circumstances for how this skin wizard came about or whatever. So we talk about the third way, and the specific quote that introduces this concept is, the last way, the old way, the road we're going down, to make that deal directly. And it starts talking about making deals with these creatures, fairies or goblins and stuff like that. And it is very, like, deal with the devil imagery, like Crossroads deal style stuff, which is obviously, since this is a modern supernatural setting, that has a lot of cultural baggage of, like, these deals aren't good ones to make. No one ever really comes away with a positive experience from dealing with the devil, right? And so I'm excited to see the consequences and circumstances that surround what this deal is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, nothing about the language of this about page gives you the impression that this is going to be a good way to go about things, right? Yeah. Like, you entirely set up as, like, okay, like, and whether you have context of other Wildbow works, and that it's not all happy roses for the protagonist, it's kind of like, that this is just going to be something where someone is ending up way over their head, way out of their depth.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, I think that's sort of followed up. I think the next line is sort of the teaser for this specific story where where it just says, something terrible happened of a scale that words cannot easily convey. We need you to look into it. No need to solve it. Simply look into it. And, like, I love that, because it's just like, you don't have to solve it. We just need you to look, which seems so low stakes, and it just immediately raises alarm bells for me. I'm just like, okay, so this is going to go fucking terribly.
Yeah, I mean, the no need to solve it, simply look into it is like, it's basically saying, winking to us as the reader, that this is a story about solving this thing, and whatever happens, the character that has to solve it is going to or that has to look into it is going to get more embroiled than they initially meant to. Like, that's almost explicitly what this teaser is saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. So let's talk about the name Pale. Why not? Pale. So obviously Wildbow works have ironic or multi-layered titles. When I'm thinking of pale, I'm thinking of like monsters that might have like pale skin, which traditionally probably means a vampire is the thing that jumps to your mind, but maybe like ghosts or fairies as well are kind of like that. Or maybe like a wizard or a magician. You know, we don't have a word for what it is people who do this magic is, so I'm just going to call them wizards. A wizard who is like a sun-averse for some reason. I don't know. I'm trying to think like what's the first layer meaning that this could be, and I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I associate like the moon, like with like, pale lighting.
Yeah.
And obviously the moon featured somewhat heavily in the prologue that we're about to get into. But also, like, I think the definition that I tended to focus on a lot more was, pale as in like inferior, like if something pales in comparison.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how potentially our protagonist is going to be someone making a deal with one of these magical creatures, and you just can't help but think they're going to be someone who pales in comparison to everything they're dealing with, like some poor schmuck who's just, way out of their depth.
I think so too. I think the second meaning is, are you familiar with the phrase beyond the pale?
Yes.
Okay, so the origin of this phrase is like this part of Ireland that was known as the Pale that was like controlled. And so beyond the pale meant something that was out of the bounds of the norm, right? Like beyond the pale means something going outside the bounds of the norm. And so presumably pale, I kind of see it being set up as like something, the story might start out with things seeming like they're in the bounds of what is standard, but obviously the implication is that it's going to move beyond that pale at some point, right?
I'm sure like other sci-fi and fantasy books have used the term beyond the pale to refer to like, like the afterlife or spirit worlds or what have you.
Beyond, like behind the veil is kind of in that vein as well. But yeah. And then beyond, obviously, beyond the pale kind of is inferred also from the tagline of the serial, which is beyond a doubt, right?
Yeah.
So the word beyond kind of comes up next to pale, like, okay, it suggests that to me. But then beyond a doubt is also interesting because, again, yes, it's a common phrase, but I feel like it's going to mean something more. Like, for some reason, a character is going to go beyond doubt in some way. And I don't really know what that means, but I just know that it's going to happen.
Well, it looks like, at least at first, we've sort of got a bit of a murder. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's some sort of murder mystery going on. And, there's obviously like beyond a doubt in terms of like proving convictions in the legal sense.
Yeah.
So could be something to do with that as well.
Yeah. So as we leave the about page, I'm just going to call out the things that it explicitly brings up. That means we can refer to them without going into packed spoilers. 3 things. One is the practices exist. There's magic. Okay, cool. There's magic in this world. We can talk about that.
So the practices, it seems to be the term used for magic at the start of this blurb. Yeah.
Yep. They make reference to others a few times in this about page, which seems to refer to like otherworldly creatures, e.g. fae/fairies, goblins, ghosts, or in air quotes, things straight out of horror films, basically spooky monsters.
Yeah, and then obviously the other thing it says is that others can't lie.
Yes. Yeah, which I think might become important. We'll see. And then I just have to talk about, so the end of this ends with a disclaimer of like, of course, this is all fictional, like any references are accidental, blah, blah, blah. And the final line is, if you run into anything that resembles some of the more dangerous things in this story, seek a priest or a counselor. Which is just a great little line to slip into the end of that disclaimer.
I love how it opens with priest as well. So it's just, this disclaimer is giving you the benefit of the doubt.
And with that, should we talk about the actual chapter, which is Blood Run Cold 0.0?
Let's start talking about the actual story now.
Yeah.
So this is a prologue. I think the new chapter's out already, and so this is just the single chapter prologue that we're dealing with here.
Yep. And it deals with a character called Louise, who we'll kind of learn more about over the course of the chapter, but it basically starts right inside her head as she hears this animal howl, and kind of hears this ethereal howl, and starts hallucinating bloody tears that start pouring out of her eyes.
I mean, good thing they're just hallucinations, because at first I was worried they were real, but she says it's okay, they're just hallucinations, and so they're just fake and nothing's wrong.
Yes, we should touch on this. It seems that nothing that happens in this chapter is real. Everything is just a hallucination, and presumably the next chapter that's already come out is just her visiting her counselor and upping her meds dosage, and then that's the end of the story.
I mean, to be fair though, like if I was on medication that someone had told me might cause hallucinations, and then I started seeing giant dogs and the moon bleeding, I would be hoping with all of my heart that it was the drugs.
No. So, Louise. This chapter just makes you feel so bad for Louise, right? Except maybe the very end where you get a slight bit of a happy ending for her. This entire chapter is in her perspective, and basically the one beat that it continuously hits is how much chronic pain she is in constantly.
Yeah. I definitely spent most of the chapter feeling really sorry for her. We do learn some things just before the end that make me feel like a little bit less bad for her in some ways. We can talk about that when we get there, but I mean, you're right. I think the thing that really got to me with all this is it's not just all the chronic pain that she's experiencing, but the way she's framing it in her internal monologue, because it's like, you know, she's experiencing pains that are ridiculous for someone her age. I think she says she's 35. And you know, it's like she has to double check her medications, which is something someone twice her age would have to do. So it's not just framed that like she's very sort of infirm, but also
it's like unnatural for her to be so.
And there's a greater sense of loss, because like the way she's framing all this, it really makes it sound like she feels like she hasn't really gotten to live her life yet. So it's like her life is ending. It's already sort of, you know, sunsetting, and she hasn't really lived it yet. And so there's just that extra layer of tragedy on top of all the, like, you know, all the other bad stuff.
Yeah, it is tragic, right? It is a really tragic vibe from Louise.
Yeah.
So she sees this howl and she kind of checks it out, sees a gigantic dog, in air quotes, hallucination, and kind of goes, okay, this is a hallucination, I shouldn't deal with this. And then we get this line where it says, driven by impulse, she stepped off of her front porch. And that's so suspicious, right? Like, I don't know what it means exactly, but the fact that a sentence like driven by impulse in a story where we know there's shenanigans going on, basically, always raises red flags of like, something is manipulating the situation here, whether that's fate, whether that's a character intentionally doing it, like whether that's Louisa's curiosity and she's just kind of masking it as something else. I'm just like, that can't just be impulse. Like, it's never just impulse, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. I mean, this is curious, to say the least.
Yes.
I mean, there is a thing she mentions. I think every time this creature howls, she sort of notes how it affects her emotionally.
Yeah.
So like I think maybe you're right. Like I wouldn't be surprised to learn that there's something in its howl that is like meant to be. In fact, I'll get to my full theory later on what I think is happening right here. But I think you may be right that the howl is actually designed to make her more sympathetic and more likely to try and
help or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting because obviously this. Well, yeah, I guess we'll talk about what we think about this curious incident of this dog in the nighttime later on. But I'm interested to hear whether you feel like this dog is a villainous force or not, because there's kind of a few conflicting little bits, right? Like Louise feels sympathy and sadness towards it, but also its howl like makes her cry bloody tears. And later on, characters who seem to know a bit more about what's going on kind of toe the line between calling it scary and sad. I guess I'm just interested to hear more about what you think it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can get into that now. Just let me scroll down to find my notes on it, because they're a bit further down.
Maybe let's get into it later when more stuff is revealed, I guess. Yeah, Louise decides to play the investigator and follow this big red dog under the bloody moon, tracking it all throughout the town that she lives in called Kennet, and kind of giving us a bit of like musing on Kennet as a town as she goes through it.
Yeah, this is sort of our introduction to Kennet as we go.
Yeah.
But I just want to bring up at this point, as she's following this, how kind of how this doesn't at all make physical sense. Like, we're entering a world with magic, and you really feel that because she's able to track this thing using the moon, and that doesn't make sense if you think about how the moon normally operates. It's too far away. And it's like, and it's dripping the blood the whole time directly on the dog, which again, like, that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. And I think to pull out an explicit confirmation by Wildbow here, it's meant to be like a bit difficult to visualize this scene. Like, reading this, it's very what magical. Does this mean? Yeah, exactly. But it is intentionally a bit of a head trip for Louise and for us as the audience.
Yeah. Like, that was definitely the vibe I got, because like there's also constant mentions of how like sound isn't carrying right. Like, you know, she's often hearing these sounds as if the dog is sort of right next to her, even when it isn't. So there's all this sort of stuff going on with perception being fucked with, and that really establishes how sort of mystical and magical this all is. It's very otherworldly.
Yeah, definitely. So let's touch on Kennett a bit. It's a kind of iconic supernatural story, small town kind of vibe, right?
Hell yeah.
It's modern enough that we can relate to it, but small enough of a town that weird shit can kind of have this seedy underbelly that goes unnoticed by many, and that still feels plausible. It's the iconic supernatural setting.
It absolutely is. Like, this sort of opens with Louise like gets in her car and she's immediately driving through the forest. And I was pretty much already picturing like this sort of temperate like forest. In fact, let's be honest, I was picturing the forests of Vancouver because that's where like every supernatural TV show's filmed.
Yes.
But yeah, like I was already, and she actually pulls into town and I was already like, yeah, this is exactly what I was picturing. A fucking small town that is the setting for so many supernatural stories like this because it's just such a good one.
Yeah, maybe we should touch on the idea that the small town murder mystery also is a bit of a trope. You know, you've got things like, well, I guess the big one that I would pull out is something like Twin Peaks, right? Where we've got small town supernatural murder mystery. And it seems like this is the genre we're starting to settle into, which is one that I really enjoy. Whether it's a small town supernatural murder mystery or a small town regular murder mystery, I'm keen to dive into it more, basically.
Yeah, same. Although, I mean, the fun twist here, obviously, is that it's not quite a person who got murdered from the looks of it.
It's a dog, a big spirit dog.
Yeah.
Louise follows the ghost dog, and she passes by a gas station where she notices some chill teens hanging out and shooting the shit, as well as some other things, right?
Yeah, she starts going down the stairs into the main part of town, and there's some other monkey-like things on the stairs with her.
Yeah, basically these little, I don't know, like they're, and I guess this is something that we're going to see a lot, and a theme that runs throughout the entirety of this prologue is Louisa's senses being untrustworthy, right? Whether she thinks that's due to hallucination or just kind of the weirdness in this town seeming like she can never quite get a handle on it, right? Like she can't quite make out the features of these, I don't know, chimpanzee beasts. Or there's a part later where she notes that she can't quite look at the face of a character. Things that just can't quite be perceived.
Yeah, it's that sort of thing. And because, you know, that conversation later, I think Matthew, the guy, kind of starts to go into how when you're sort of close to death or whatever, you start to be able to see these more magical things. Yeah. And it seems like she's right on the border of that. So she can kind of, she's noticing these things, which I guess must be around a lot more than you know, right now. But she's not quite at the point where she can fully see everything. So, you know, like she can see that woman, but she can't see the face for some reason. Yeah. She's seeing silhouettes of these little creatures, but she can't actually see what they look like. It's like it adds that sort of sense as well that this could all be an hallucination, and this is all something she could just forget because she's not like fully confirmed exactly how crazy and magical it all is.
What if we get to a point in this story where we think we're unraveling the murder mystery, and then it turns out, oh no, like 7/8 of this chapter was just a hallucination, and most of this didn't actually happen. There's like one real bit that happened, but most of it was just a hallucination.
That would be an interesting choice. Yeah, but I started to feel even more sorry for Louise here because she starts to become really convinced that she is just insane. She can't bring herself to not keep following the dog, which again maybe points to some of your theories about that not being completely her decision.
Yes.
But like, she's getting looks, people sort of whispering as she's running by. She's very self-conscious because she hasn't like showered in a couple of days or something. She just feels like that crazy person, running through town, sort of causing mayhem. And I mean, you just made that joke before, but I think we all know that she's probably not hallucinating.
No, almost certainly. This is all legitimately happening. So
it's heartbreaking.
Yes, no, it's pretty rough. Not in the least because these little monkey things, whatever, they seem to be following this dog as well, and Louise kind of joins them for a bit. But we don't actually, while we do get bits and pieces of what's happening with the dog later on, we don't actually hear more about these chimps, right? Like these little critters. I don't know, they behave in some interesting ways. They do a thing where it's like, they'll get to the edge of town and then they'll stop. They clearly don't want to go into civilization or where there's more light / more people. So there's still a few beats around these gremlins that I'm not really sure what they are, and it'll be interesting to see how that gets resolved going forward.
Yeah, let's swing back to the whole thing where they stop at sort of the edge of civilization in a bit, because I think that comes up again later.
Okay, cool. So yeah, then Louise continues to follow this ghost dog all the way to the Kennet Arena, which is a big hockey rink, basically, a sports rink. And when she's there, she bumps into an old classmate who seems justifiably, I think, concerned about her.
I'm not gonna lie, this moment really worked on me, because, like, with everything sort of going on in the world right now, as we're recording this in May 2020.
Yeah.
I went to get takeaway a few days ago. Not gonna lie, I was not in the best shape or outfit as I went. And I ran into my old boss when I was there, and it was just like, God, I wish I had like shaved and not worn my pajamas out to the takeaway shop to run into my old boss. So I felt this moment so viscerally. I was just like, I was reliving that night. So I feel for you, Louise.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, so Lincoln, her old classmate.
Yes.
He just seems like such a cool person. Like,
he seems pretty cool, doesn't he?
I was really torn between wanting Louise to just accept his help and make everything get better, but also I did kind of want, as a reader, I was like, Lincoln, fuck off. I want to see what the deal is with the giant dog. Like, sorry, Louise, but we need to find out about the dog.
To be sacrificed for our understanding. It's interesting. Whenever we're in a story, at the start of a story, even in a prologue like this, and we see a character like Lincoln, and it's like, is this just an old classmate and it's a one and done thing, or is this guy going to be an important part of the story?
Well, especially when you got a setting like this, like a small town, because
yes.
Like, a big thing that Louise keeps noting as we're seeing everyone in this chapter is, like, most people she can sort of say, oh, I think that's related to so-and-so. Like, you either know everyone or you know someone who knows them.
At least.
Yeah. And so, like, it's hard not to think, is Lincoln going to come back? Is he going to be vital in Arc 3?
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair to say it seems at this point that Lincoln is just a one-and-done little side character that Wildbow wrote to flesh out our world a little bit, but maybe. And also, the thing that's interesting to me is Lincoln, and to a lesser extent some other kind of tertiary people that we see later on, are obstacles, right? They're obstacles for Louise to continue following this thing. Something is drawing her to continue to follow this dog, right? Whether that's her own consciousness or her own conscience or something else. And Lincoln is an obstacle that is being put in her way. And I'm not confident enough to say that that's just being put in her way by Wildbow, the author, or if it's some like in-universe thing trying to get her to not, follow this thread, which makes me think there's possibly a bit more going on with Lincoln than we might see at first.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. That's the thing. You can't know at this point. Like, I'm not confident putting down like predictions either way on any of this stuff. Like, because I could see any of these being true. Yeah.
We'll see. I am confident putting down predictions, though. Lincoln is not going to be a major character, but there's going to be a bit more to why he got in her way here than we first thought. That's
Lincoln's the big bad. Lincoln's the villain. Lock it in.
Exactly. So Louise kind of gets to the KA, as they call it, the arena, and kind of is looking around and notices the moon is no longer bleeding and seems to kind of be slipping out of this state of noticing a lot of these things, until she then kind of finds stains matching the blood and body of the great beast. And it seems like it has died here. It's fallen down and kind of disintegrated into stains on the ground.
Yeah, so quickly something I want to pull from here is we just talked about how the little monkey things seemed to stop when they hit like proper civilization. I think it was like the street lights.
Yeah.
That they weren't willing to go into.
Yeah.
And like I've definitely got the vibe from those things that they were like scavengers. Like I assumed they were following the dog, waiting to feast on the kill, I suppose. And what I couldn't help but notice is Louise has sort of three options for how to get around the KA. She tries the left, but there's traffic, and that all seems like too much for her. And then she looks going through the building, and it's full of people, and she's not about that. So she ends up going around the right. And the right is like dark. She's sort of hunching her way through bushes.
Yeah, she pushes through like a hedge, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and like, it's all this great imagery for sort of her being in the dark, or she's like pushing through the dark to get the revelations and whatnot. But like the sort of the way that she has her option of sort of going through society and through people, and she chooses this sort of backwards, dark path, I think is maybe sort of giving us a bit of a framing for where exactly she's at in this situation. Like she's, by pushing through to see this dog, she is kind of leaving the acceptance of society, I think. And, because she's kind of doubling down on her, what she would view as her being crazy right now. And I think this is that sort of captured.
Yeah, and to put a more explicit beat on that, she's doing the same thing that these little gremlin chimps did, right? Of intentionally avoiding society and avoiding, the light, as it were, which kind of seems like it's starting to say, Louise, you're starting to blur the line between your world and the seedy magical world that you're pushing into.
Yeah, it also does not bode well.
No, definitely not. So let's talk about this dog a bit now that we kind of get to the point of its death and it disintegrates in the ground. I guess the comparison I want to make straight off the bat is it feels... the line that we're trying to toe here is it scary or is it sympathetic? Is it one or the other, or is it both, or what is it, right? And Louise definitely isn't scared by it at any point. She kind of gets to this point of being like awe-inspired by it just because it's a huge spiritual bloody red dog. And we get this point of when she finally realizes, no, it's dead. Like she finally starts to feel the cold, for example, and this kind of rush of reality coming back to hit her. The comparison I want to make is it feels like it's like a great spiritual beast, like Heibai, the spirit of the forest in Avatar: The Last Airbender, where it's this thing that, depending on your context and relationship to it, it could be a aggressive or a nurturing force, but it's neither really. It's just kind of a spiritual embodiment of some powerful thing, a kind of fundamental force of the universe, That's what it feels like to me.
I definitely was getting major, giant nature spirit vibes from it as well. Like it's some sort of local important spirit is definitely the vibe I've gotten. It's funny, the first time I was reading through this, I definitely read the giant beast as much more like intimidating and kind of scary. Yeah. And I thought it was moving with like this sort of purpose, like it might have been on the attack. And it was really only the second time as I was reading more closely, I realized, I think the chapter starts with it being dealt the blow that kills it. And I think everything we're seeing is it getting to civilization. I think it was trying to die as publicly as possible so that, somebody would look into it, I guess. Yeah.
To draw attention to its own murder.
Yeah. And so I think that's where, all the stuff we've been talking about, like with the howl and the way it kind of compels maybe Louise to help. I think that might have been like what it was trying to do, because especially like all the imagery when we're first introduced to this giant wolf creature is like, it's got its tail down sort of between its legs. Like, I think it was already scared and dying and in pain when we first meet it. And this whole thing is basically its final steps, the classic crime scene thing where you walk, you've got the person who's been shot and they walk somewhere where everyone can see them to try and help their murder get solved.
Collapse on the sundial, pointing to M and S with his last breath, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's what's been happening here, and it's interesting how different that read was. Like when I sort of started on that my second read through, you can suddenly see how everything this beast is doing is just kind of sad and pained, whereas before I was much more thinking, oh, it's slow, but it's powerful and dangerous. It's not. It's marching to its death.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to dive into that a bit more, because I think we as readers, when we see that, when we see a description of a huge, gigantic red kind of dog or wolf, whichever, we naturally assume that that's a scary thing, right? Because it is a giant monster. Like, it is a bit...
Yeah.
You'd be right to assume that's scary. And actually, characters in the story who know what's going on, we meet, like, Matthew. He assumes that Louise would have been scared by it, even though she wasn't, even though she kind of got to the point of seeing it as sympathetic. And maybe it even is the fact that Louise lives out of town means that she has a better attunement to things like this, whether that's kind of a forest spirit, and so because she lives out in the forest, she's kind of attuned with it slightly, or something not as explicit, but there definitely seems to be a bit of a duality to it that I think is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of get the impression when it's not already mortally wounded, this giant dog is probably pretty fucking intimidating.
Yeah. We should call out the moon imagery as well, because obviously it's a wolf. It howls at the moon, and the moon starts to bleed when it's injured. Like, possibly a moon spirit is something that we're talking about here, but we don't really have enough information to pin it down, I don't think.
Knowing Wildbow, it'll probably be something a little like an extra layer. There's always an extra layer or something that I can't predict, but in retrospect seems obvious. I actually did do some reading. I was trying to find research on North American native moon or wolf spirits, particularly around the North Shore of Lake Superior. I kind of had no idea what I was doing though, so I didn't manage to find anything. But that was my first guess, was that it was something from sort of the native people from that area, their sort of mythology, but couldn't find anything.
So basically Louise finds that this thing has died, and as she's kind of figuring out what her next step should be, she seems to almost be lost now that she's found it and it's dead. She overhears some strangers also trying to figure out what they should do next.
Yep, just a bunch of normal people doing normal people things.
Yeah.
So to quickly run through them, because just so we all know, because it's so the knowledge we get about them is so spread out throughout this thing that I thought it was helpful to summarize. So obviously there's the guy Matthew who has sort of kissing based reversed vampire powers.
Yes.
There's Edith, who wears a toque, and she is Matthew's life partner. There are a bunch of children of the corn, and some of them are practicing for their Glee Club's upcoming regionals.
Yep.
And there's some sort of I'm just going to call her a faceless woman, because obviously the universe is seemingly contriving very hard to make sure Louise cannot see her face.
Yeah, we can just call her the faceless woman, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Can we talk about the Glee Club children? Do you think these are the same as the other chimp things we saw? Because they are also kind of child-sized, although these ones seem slightly different.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they might be two separate things, but I'll admit that was something that came after my first read-through. Definitely the first time I was reading through, I thought they were the same thing. I'm not as sure anymore.
Yeah, I kind of have this feeling that they're different, but I couldn't really put my finger on why.
Yeah, no, me either.
So now we get to the part where the real theories start to fly, right? This is the part of the prologue where we're really in the theorizing zone. Because obviously it seems like these characters are going to be at least somewhat important to the ongoing story. It seems like, well, this isn't really a prediction, I guess, to start with, but obviously some of these people aren't human. The children of the corn and the faceless woman are clearly not human, right? That's just basically obvious.
Not completely. At least, I doubt they're just regular normal humans. At the very least, they've done the equivalent of exchanging their skin for that of a serpent, you know?
Yeah, totally. We get Matthew and Edith, who I think Edith doesn't seem human. Matthew seems the most human that we've seen. Maybe a wizard, could be something else.
He's definitely something, because he does the whole kissing vampire thing, but he's at least a wizard.
Yes, sure. He has to be at least a wizard, if not more. But he does, I don't know. Okay, maybe we should get to this. As far as we know about others from the about page and from how creepy those gremlin things were before, they're villains. They're monsters, right? But Matthew, if he's a wizard or if he's another, we're not sure, but he seems to take a few actively kind steps towards Louise, right?
Yeah, I mean, he seems like a cool dude. Like, you know, he's no Lincoln.
Yeah, and it's... well, yeah, of course. Or is he? Well, maybe they're one and the same.
Oh, man, we're really gone wild with the theories already.
Yes.
Yeah. No, like, yeah, he seems like a nice dude. I mean, he's obviously somewhat self-motivated here. I'm not entirely sure exactly in what way. But he does seem somewhat genuinely interested in helping Louise out, or, you know, making her go away in a way that is pretty good for her.
Well, yeah, it's not just making her forget stuff, right? Because I get the sense she would kind of agree to that anyway. It's the additional step of, and here, look, we'll throw this in, I'll take away some of your pain. So, yeah, what happens is Matthew offers her a deal to basically say, I'll help you forget this ever happened so that you don't get too embroiled in it, but I will, as a little bonus, I'll take away some of your chronic pain.
Yeah. So that seems like a pretty cool move.
Yeah.
You know, I guess it's a Wildbow work. I can never 100% give someone the complete benefit of the doubt, even when they do something nice. But yeah, I agree. Like the woman whose face we can't see, that fact makes me immediately less trusting of her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Right. It just feels, and although she also seems to be pretty on the level. Like, she is pretty aligned with Matthew about, they kind of argue about the semantics of what they should do, but I think she's pretty on the level with them about, you know, not treating Louise poorly.
Yeah, I agree. But no, so at the moment, I'm assuming that these guys are somehow involved in the death of this spirit, just from some of the phrasing they use early in the conversation. Or at the very least, they're nervous about being connected to its death. Yes. They talk about being nervous about bringing outsiders in, which is also very interesting. You know, it's the classic, this is I guess the magical version of not wanting the feds to come in.
Yeah.
You know, so and that's a staple of your small town murder mystery. So it's good. It's good to see that we'll be getting the magical equivalent of that. I wonder if maybe they were tasked with protecting this thing, and now they've failed.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess to touch on the dog again, like, seems like the death of this dog is a tragedy. Whatever it is, it's something that shouldn't have happened. And we get the bit in the about page of something terrible happening and you need to look into it. We don't actually get those lines in this prologue, but it does seem like this is the incident that is being referred to.
I'd assume so. Like, it's the basis of the prologue.
Yeah.
It would make sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess the one other thing I want to touch on is the idea that in the about page, we talked about the 3 ways of entering the world. And this doesn't feel like it's any of them. This doesn't feel like it definitely doesn't feel like the number 3 that is explicitly called out as the way that we're doing.
Yeah.
Even though Louise is making a deal with this potential devil, it doesn't really give us these vibes of that's how she's getting embroiled. Yeah.
I don't get the impression that Louise is going to be the protagonist. Like, you don't do a prologue and have it from the perspective of your protagonist. So I think she's just going to be a witness, maybe our protagonist deals with later.
Yeah, it is explicitly referenced by Matthew as part of this deal that she might have to talk to somebody later who might investigate with her. But yeah, Louise ends up taking this deal and has a kind of a few moments of her mind slipping away before she wakes back up at home with much less pain than she should have.
Yeah. So one thing I want to touch on here is, like, as part of sort of making this deal, and I guess it feels like she's getting vetted by Matthew.
Yeah.
She gives them, like, the history and details of her health issues. And, like, obviously it's tragic, but, you know, she kind of jokes a couple of times throughout the chapter that, you know, oh, you know me, I can't take care of myself. And then, like, the first thing she does the next morning is goes and she's like, well, I'm feeling way better. I'm going to have my cigarette early. And I was like, come on, Louise. Like, the biggest tragedy of Louise's story, I think, is that she's not changing in her ways.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about, like, her impulse. Like, she followed this thing on impulse. I mean, hedonistic doesn't seem like quite the right word, but she's clearly someone who is she's not a long-term planner, I guess is what I would say about Louise. So it may not have been that supernatural, this thing that, you know, gave her the impulse to follow it, because I think she is just someone who kind of follows her whims. Yeah, exactly. I think she's someone who indulges her impulses perhaps too regularly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I guess this chapter ends with some neighbors coming in to check on her, and both her and the neighbors having this weird vibe of something happened, but we don't really know what, as their kind of memories slip away.
Yeah, it really sells the whole, like, something wrong happened on a fundamental level from the about page, in the sense that even these people who, you know, don't know anything about magic are sort of looking around the hills being like, something's
wrong. Yeah,
exactly. And sort of semi-related to that, like, I'm backtracking a bit, I love how what Matthew did with Louise had to be a kiss as well, because it made it so much more uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, if it had been, you know, he references that it doesn't work quite as well if he held her hand, but you can see, like, if he just sort of shook her hand and she started to feel, you know, 60% as better as she did, you'd be like, oh, you know, that's cool. Like, you know, he just did her a solid. The fact that it has to be a kiss where he has to, like, force her to stay kissing him because of all the, like, bitter taste as the pain is being sucked out of her, just makes the whole thing feel so much less okay.
Yeah, it's more invasive, right? It is just more invasive and off-putting.
Yeah, and that's what makes, like, the whole thing, like, you know, I was saying I don't think Matthew's as good as Lincoln, and it's stuff like this that stains my perspective on, like, how just good he can be, because it's like, the fact is, this is a guy who came out, like, helped her, made her forget bad things, or I don't know whether I call that good or not, but, you know, also, like, took away her pain, and I still left away with this impression of him maybe not being that great, which is an impressive thing to do, considering what he did was make her feel better.
I mean, yeah, he explicitly helped her more than Lincoln did, right? But because he's creepy, it doesn't leave as good of a taste in your mouth, literally, for Louise.
Yeah, and I mean, I doubt, like, you know, like, I have enough trust in Wildbow at this point to, like, think that that's exactly what he's trying to do.
Yes.
So, like, it just leaves you with this little shred of doubt about Matthew and how legit he is.
Yeah. But that's where this chapter ends. I put in a picture of the banner art for this chapter as well, which is a picture of a bunch of blood-stained swords in the snow, basically, and some strange sigils, which just give a creepy vibe. I don't know if there's any explicit things being called out. You can kind of see a half shadow of a woman behind one of these trees, which is maybe the faceless woman, but I don't think there's anything explicit being pointed out in this art. It's just kind of setting this creepy, unsettling murder scene.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, we know this this wolf thing seemingly had its throat slashed based on some observations Louise makes after it's passed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this could be footage of something to do with the murder scene. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Like, I don't quite know how this ties into the prologue. It'll probably make sense later in the story.
Yeah. And that's the end of the prologue. So before the first actual chapter, we also got this brochure for basically a brochure advertising Experience Kennet, which contained a map and some key areas around Kennet, and also contained some notes made by some other character.
Presumably the protagonist.
Presumably, yes.
I mean, first of all, we should talk about how cool this is. Like, this extra material is such a great bonus bit of content to get injected into the Wildbow formula.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels fun and fresh.
It makes the world feel more alive. Like, I used to, when I was younger, go to Thredbo, an Australian ski resort.
Yeah.
Very often when I was growing up. And this is the exact kind of shit that they have. Like, it's very on brand for a ski resort. So it's just kind of like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm already kind of using my childhood memories of Jindabyne as a bit of a
totally
map to Kennet. Yes, like, I agree. Like, I think having a map is just nice too. Like, I know that's sort of a whole debate as to whether that sort of thing's needed. I think it's cool. I definitely used it the second time I was reading through the prologue for this recording to, like, understand exactly where Louise went. Like, yeah, I'm excited to see what else we get. Like, you know, whether it's visual or like, you know, little bonus bits of text or whatever. I think it's just such a cool way to kind of inject variety into the story that doesn't require, like, bonus chapters or something, you know?
Yeah. The other thing I like is it's so ripe for theory crafting of which parts are going to become relevant, right?
Yeah. Oh, this brochure in particular is a massive tease. Like,
Yeah,
this
totally.
is just Wildbow stacking imagery together just to fuck with everyone. Like the shopping list is like, I'm sure everyone's read into the shopping list way more than we need to.
Even the map though, like the arena obviously has some significance already just by being the place where this thing died. But the two things that are marked out, there's gas stations, there's sports areas, there's ski slopes, and then there's two churches marked. And, this is a modern supernatural setting. It's probably fair to assume that religion is going to be at least somewhat important in the iconography of this world. And so the fact that there are two churches marked on this, I'm kind of like, well, which one of these is going to be important? Or like reading through the list of the other places marked on the map, which is like a beer market, the Kennett Cinema, public school, Wavy Tree Yoga and Dance, ATV and dirt bike rental. I'm like, which ones of these are going to be important to the story? There's a Ontario Liquor and Cannabis, which presumably is going to be very relevant, hopefully.
Yeah, no, it's so much fun. Like this whole thing, as you said, the last page is just the one that is designed to fuck with your brain and make you go nuts trying to interpret it.
Yeah.
We also get sort of confirmation that we're in Ontario in this one. So it's sort of, I think it says that you get views of the western side of Lake Superior.
A view of Western Ontario's hills and icy Lake Superior.
Right, yeah. So presumably on the western shore of or would you be on the eastern shore looking at the western hills?
I don't know. Don't ask me to do geography, Elliot.
Anyway, the point is somewhere around Lake Superior. So like, it's just fun how much information this gave us.
Yes. The other thing that this points out to us is 3 characters, right? Like it hints at 3 characters referred to as L, V, and A.
I wasn't fully sold on that until I noticed the sticky note had like 3 sets of what I assume are little checkboxes.
Yes.
And on
the map it's like 3 paths marked to a key place for 5:30. Like, it does feel like it's 3 characters.
Yeah, the Ron, Harry, and Hermione.
Exactly. And I think we can just call them Ron, Harry, and Hermione for the rest of the story.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what LVA stands for.
Yep. LeRon, Vary, and Hermione. I mean, there's a shopping list full of things that are clearly dodgy and something's going on with them. They need to collect a bunch of somewhat regular groceries, and then it gets a little bit weird. There's a picture of a knife, I think what is a needle and thread, an hourglass, a skull, a coin, and a box that says something ours, and this is like underlined. So obviously this is some kind of ritual, right? Like that is immediately what it signifies to me.
Yes. But look, we should be completely honest. I think we have a fairly good idea what ritual this might be.
No way.
Based on having read Pact.
Yeah.
But I mean, with that in mind, what we've decided to do to help with speculating in a way that, doesn't involve someone who's read Pact to level us with all the pale people, we've brought somebody on to help.
Yes, so we've brought in our special guests to do some unspoiled theorizing, I guess we'll call it. Non-Pact spoiled theorizing. Welcome, Hannah and Georgia Diebold from the acclaimed Diebold Family Plays Video Games on Twitch show.
Hey. Hi, everyone.
Yes. We've brought you on because you both haven't read Pact, which I find very personally offensive because
very unsupportive family dynamic.
Look, one day it'll happen. We'll get there.
I mean, it's paying dividends now. So I think just to get everyone up to speed on where you're at, I think, Georgia, you've read a tiny bit of Worm and now a bit of Pale.
Yes.
And Hannah, you have read all of Worm and most of Ward?
Yeah, about 2/3 of Ward, I think, at this point. And read Worm.
Awesome. So I guess what we've really got you here for, though, is to get your opinions as people who haven't read Pact of what the hell might be going on in this prologue of Pale.
Yep.
Yeah, so what do you think's going on so far?
Look, it's pretty hard. There's a lot of mystery.
There's not a lot in the prologue to go off of.
Yeah. I think, I kind of felt that maybe these random people released some sort of demon somehow, and now they don't know how to get it back, and some big organization is going to come and get them. And Louise is just a bystander maybe just for this one prologue because she doesn't seem like a big character, so not sure she's actually going to stay in the story.
Yeah.
Or if she is, she'll just be minor.
I mean, first things first, it seems like it's set in a world that is essentially our world but with magic. So all the, there's like a gas station and teenagers doing teenager stuff.
But most people don't seem to know about the magic.
Yeah, it's like a secret. And it seems like, you know, Louise wasn't able to see magical things before, but now she can. But these people that she's run into, I'm unclear on whether they themselves are magical, because there's the person whose like face she keeps not being able to see, which seems like it's magic. And I don't know whether she could see that person before, but then some of the other people she knows from around town, like they work in the shops and stuff. So I'm not clear whether maybe some of them are magical creatures and some of them aren't. But either way, they can all presumably see all the magic.
Yeah.
And by magic, I guess we mean this, like whatever this thing is, that
demon creature thing.
Yeah, this big creature thing that got covered in blood from the moon or something. I'm not sure what was going on there. I even reread it and I was like, I still don't know what's happening. Yeah.
Or to talk about the blood for a bit, I'm curious, like, so Louise has the whole thing where she's like crying blood, but then also not because other people can't see the blood. Like it's only the people who can see magic.
Yeah, so what was the name of the guy who Matthew, who she sort of makes this deal with. And like so he can see the blood and obviously she can see the blood too.
But the guy in the pickup truck didn't seem to be able to see it.
Yeah. So. And I think Matthew said that she was crying because she hadn't really seen much magic before. She sort of says she's been having some very slight hallucinations for the last few weeks or so. Because it was such a big thing to see or something, because this thing was presumably very large and very magical.
Yeah.
She's had the bleeding, but yeah, I guess it's not real bleeding because she can't feel it sort of like in her eyes. So it's like magic blood.
Yeah.
Something. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm curious the things that just kind of jumped out at you as strange. Like what kind of things you saw in that prologue that you want to put a pin in to figure out later?
I think for me, I was most intrigued that when she saw this giant creature, it made her sad. That I think Matthew or something later says that, oh, you were probably scared when you saw it. And she was like, no, I felt sad, which judging from the howling and everything, I'm wondering where this creature came from, why it seems to be sad and why it makes her feel sad.
Yeah, I agree. I guess also that, I'm still trying to figure out kind of what everything is. So, like I already touched on the fact that there's sort of these group of people who maybe some or not all are magical, unclear. Not all humans seem to be able to see magical things, and Louise has only started to be able to see it because she's terminally ill, like because she's close to death. So, which is kind of sinister. Like, so I don't think magic is going to be a very nice thing in this world. I think it's going to be a bit dark.
I almost wondered because they said that the obscured woman lady said that, the young people, old people, and people near death can see them, which made me think that they're seeing, beyond the veil of the world into sort of a spirit world. Since that does tend to be common in TV shows and everything. So that would be my first thought with that this is some sort of demon or dead thing that she's seeing.
And then the people she's met with, they're clearly suspicious. Like they talk about, that they need to plant clues and like cover this, like they're trying to cover this up. I'm pretty sure they overtly say that.
Yeah.
And that they are using Louise to plant a clue for whoever these people or creatures or whatever are who are going to come and investigate.
I found it interesting that they themselves said that they don't understand everything about the situation. They said everything in this doesn't even make sense to us. And then they also were saying that they want to leave some clues for the people who are going to come searching for it because they're desperate enough to need their help, which indicates that they did something to set this off, but they can't control it and need help with it.
I interpreted that differently. I thought they were desperate to plant clues because they potentially wanted people to be looking in a direction other than themselves.
No, see, I even wrote down the quote of the people who will look into this will be in need of clues and will be desperate and in need of them.
Oh, so I thought them was the clues, not the people.
See, I assumed it meant they will be in need of the people who come to help control this whole situation.
Either way,
maybe.
But then it was funny because they're like planting. Well, because from the way I read it, they're planting the clue, but they want her to be 100% honest. They don't want her to lie. So, yeah.
They don't want to lie because they want them to find and fix this issue.
Yeah, that probably is the correct interpretation of that sentence.
Yeah, no, I agree though. There's something weird going on because it's like there's some of the things they say make it seem like they're involved or at risk somehow, but then also they do seem like they're kind of like, oh, just tell the truth and be open to the investigators. So you're like, okay, well that seems...
It's not very manipulative, is it? But it feels like they're being more manipulative than they're acting.
And I suppose when they said they were covering up, I guess I assumed they wanted to cover up like from the people coming to investigate, but maybe they just were talking about covering it up from like people like Louise, like humans who witnessed something strange.
I interpret it as they're some sort of either small rebel group or some sort of group outside of this main larger organization or something, and that they did something wrong, that maybe released this demon or something, did something wrong, but they're unable to fix it themselves. So they're trying to use the larger organization to fix their issue without exposing that they're the ones who caused it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, like, trying to stay out of the spotlight while getting someone else to handle it.
Yeah.
I like the references that you folks are making to some large organization. And I guess I want to pick at that a bit more and see if you have any more thoughts about what that organization is.
I mean, my thought was just some sort of governing body. Like, to be honest, my first thought was the Ministry of Magic from Harry Potter. Like, some sort of almost government that's controlling all of this magic and the magical creatures and everything. But then, of course, there's going to be people who want to stray outside their rules or not be governed by them, who are maybe doing experiments or magic outside and trying to cover it up. So
I suppose they could be hiding because they did something wrong involving this creature, or maybe they're just like kind of general criminals and they just generally want to avoid whatever this authority is.
Yep.
But
there's not many clues on them other than them saying they're in desperate need of their help, which to me indicates that they must be some sort of governing body or like organization that will come and clean these messes up to protect the rest of the world.
I had two more quick questions. Actually, the first one should be pretty easy. What do you think is the deal with the little chimpanzee things?
Well, I mean, so firstly, I think they seem to be some other kind of maybe magical creature that Louise has not previously been able to see, but that since, she's become able to see magical things, like she's mentions that she's sort of seen things like those in the corner of her vision for the last few weeks, as I guess she gets slowly sicker. In terms of what they actually are, like, no idea. I can't think of any mythology that I know of that fits in with some kind of like chimpanzee-looking magical figure.
No.
So I don't know what they are.
I think that because they mostly appeared around the big red monster,
and they were following
it, which makes me think that they're in line with whatever that is, and don't have allegiance to anyone else. Like, I don't know who's there with though.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're necessarily directly related or if it was just that she just happened to see whether there's quite a few magical creatures in general hanging around and she just happened to see them on her way.
Yeah.
Because she can now see these things. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Look, she did say she doesn't get out of the house much, so and they could have been there the whole time, or they could have just...
And they didn't attack her or anything, so I don't think they're necessarily malicious, but anyway.
Yeah, okay. So the last question I had for you both was, like, you've seen, like, a tiny bit of magic. Like, Matthew obviously did his, like, kissing magical power. I'm curious, like, if you have any other, ideas as to how magic might work. Like, obviously, different stories have magic that works in different ways. Like, what do you think about the magic that you've seen so far, and, like, what might the rest of it be like?
Well, whatever magic Matthew did, it does seem to involve making some kind of like deal or contract.
Yeah, like he really forced her to agree to it. Like he needed her specific consent before he could do anything about it.
Yeah, and that these contracts are made through some kind of, he said he could hold her hand, but kissing worked better. So I guess there's like certain like things like rituals or something that people need to do to make make these deals. But I don't know whether all magic will need to involve the deals or not, though.
Yeah. I found it interesting also that he didn't use any sort of like wizardy stuff, like a, sort of wand or like spells or anything. But then I did notice the picture at the top of the banner had a sort of like summoning circle. So that indicates to me that there must be some sort of spells, rituals and stuff passed on, but they're also able to do magic without those things.
Yeah, and then it seems like, I guess probably certain creatures, maybe Matthew is not human, although he like works in a shop. So I don't know, maybe I'm not sure whether he's like a human who is able to do magic or whether he's like a creature that innately has magical powers that he can make deals with humans with. Not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting. I think my final thing I want to dive into is just if you have any thoughts about why this story might be called Pale, or the tagline of Beyond a Doubt, what that might be referring to. Any thoughts about that kind of stuff?
I had a really good think about this, and I couldn't come up with anything beyond like stuff that's just essentially the definition of of the word and the phrase.
Yeah.
So I guess pale, like maybe sort of losing, because pale is like losing color or losing importance. So I wasn't sure whether it would have something to do with that as a vague theme. And then Beyond a Doubt, I guess, fits in with the whole mystery, that side of things, like covering things up, like because you prove something beyond a doubt. So I only came up with some very loose themes. Maybe Hannah has something a bit better.
After reading the first chapter, my first thought was, I was sort of thinking of idioms, beyond a doubt, is this the truth beyond a shadow of a doubt sort of thing? Yeah, like that, trying to find the truth. And then pale, I was kind of thinking more pale in comparison to something, or something pales into insignificance. The real world is pale in comparison to the world of magic, or the truth pales in comparison to what's really happening. I don't know. My first thought was pale in comparison. And I feel like maybe it'll have something to do with figuring out the truth of things in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I should point out we don't really know the answer to that either, right? That's something that we know as pact readers. It's just interesting to hear more perspectives on.
Actually, I lied before. I do have one final question for you. You guys looked at the brochure, right?
Ooh, yes, briefly.
Yeah, I'm interested if you have any thoughts on what the hell's going on with the sticky note.
Yeah, let me try to pull it up now.
I kind of thought LVA were possibly the initials of 3 people.
Yep.
And then they're preparing some sort of spell. But yeah, they can't steal the stuff. So this, once again, this is coming to those sort of rules, how they had to get her consent for the magic. So they can't steal something, they have to get it by choice.
So I mean, and I know this is a stretch, so feel free to say no, but based on the ingredients for the spell, any ideas what it could be for?
Cake.
Some savoury pancakes.
it's a magic cake spell.
I don't even know what veg ash is.
I suppose I'm more focusing, there's obviously the part down the bottom where there's
there's an hourglass and
there's the skull. I don't know whether they've sort of written skull because it's a poor drawing. Actually, it's pretty good.
It's pretty obvious.
Whether they're thinking, where the hell are we going to get a skull?
But it's ticked off. It's marked. I think it's
marked. Oh, it is too. They found one. Well, maybe they were struggling. Yeah, so I guess those seem the knife and the skull are pretty sinister. I don't know if that's a coin underneath the skull.
I was also staring at the top bit where there's that sort
string. That's a needle and thread.
Yeah. No, I was staring at the top where there's the little wizard hat with a dog, cat, and I don't know, a deer or something. It's
which I guess an animal for each person.
Well, yeah, if we've got LVA and they've each got an animal.
But they all have to share one hat. And they're going to be wherever they're going to be at 5:30! Exclamation point. Don't be late.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, any ideas what it could be for?
Yeah.
Be bold. Bold
I'm
predictions.
just gonna have to say a summoning ritual. Just something.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
to summon
it's clearly
a dog, a cat, and a deer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
No, I thought it was a bit of a stretch. Like it's a tough call.
It's a hard
so
question.
that's fine.
Yeah. Cool. Any other final predictions or thoughts?
No, I don't think so. It was it's a fairly vague chapter. It's obviously setting up the mystery more than giving clues. I suspect the clues will slowly come.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of clues that over the next few chapters we'll be like, oh, that's what we're going with.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming along and giving us the non-pact reader perspective. That was pretty juicy.
Yeah, that's good.
I feel like it's frustrating for you guys, hearing all these completely wrong things that you know are wrong.
Well, the thing
and you're
is,
trying not to be like, oh yeah, you got it, and we'll be like,
No.
way off.
Yeah, I guess you two don't know the things that you've said that are close or not, but for us there were a few things in there that were surprisingly interesting, or interesting perspectives through which to view some of the things that we expect are going to come up.
Yeah.
Ooh.
All right. Oh, thanks again, and maybe we'll
Thanks for
hear from
having
you
us.
again another time.
Sure.
Bye.
Oh, those are some very interesting theories. We'll have to see how many of them pay off. But for now, that's all we have time for in our first episode of Pale Reflections.
Yes. And so we're going to do discussion questions in this show, just like we did in Deep Impact.
Yay!
That was our original content.
Yep,
for Deep
our
Impact.
completely original idea.
No, speaking of pale reflections, shout out to We've Got Ward.
Elliot, don't say it. Jeez.
But yeah, so our discussion question this week, which you can answer in the Reddit thread below, it'll be in the show notes, is what kind of extra materials do you think would be interesting to see in Pale?
Yes, I think it's been interesting to track that Wildbow has kind of broken the format of the web serial more and more over time. And this is the biggest one we've seen of him actually just putting together a visual pamphlet, which I think is great. And I'd love to see other people's ideas for what kind of extra materials or different types of format breaks we might want to see from Wildbow. I think that's an exciting thing to theorize about.
Yeah, exactly. You know, what wacky ideas for extra content do you have, I guess?
Yeah. If you want to leave your thoughts on this episode, on these first chapters / about pages / brochures, the place to do that is in our Reddit discussion thread, which will be linked down in the show notes below.
Yes, we're also on Twitter at MediaMD Podcast, which of course is the name of our other podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I do live reads. So I already did one for 0.0, and just after this comes out, I'll probably be doing one for 1.1.
Mm-hmm.
So those are in the Doof Media calendar at doofmedia.com/calendar, and at MediaMD Podcast is the place to find them.
Yes, you can also support the Doof Media Network and all the great shows that we do on Patreon. It's a completely Patreon-supported network, so head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, and you can back us, which not only gives you that warm feeling of supporting the content that you hopefully enjoy, but also gives you some real nice, tangible perks.
Yes, like voting in all the various things that happen at Doof Media. There's fan art contests, there's the book club, there's the game club that Reuben and I have just started.
Yep.
As a patron, you get your say in what sort of stuff gets covered in those.
Yes, if you're a real big patron of $10 a month, you also can vote in the Council of Doof.
That's $20.
$20 a month. God damn it, I never get these levels correct. But there's a lot of great perks at different levels if you want to check them out.
Speaking of other Doof-related things, we just brought up We've Got Ward before. They're actually doing their final episode in about 2 days after this comes out.
Yep.
So head over to the calendar again to see more about that. But they're actually streaming that one live. So that'll be on YouTube, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
And Matt and Scott are going to get on with everyone and just sort of talk about the story, do a bit of a Q&A.
Yeah.
See the show off in a really and the story in a really fun way. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, totally. You can find more info about that at doofmedia.com or doofmedia.com/calendar. And of course, we're back in the world of Wildbow. So if you want to support all the great work that Wildbow is doing, he is also a fully patron-supported author. if you head to patreon.com/Wildbow, you can support Wildbow and, help ensure that he can continue to make these great, cool things as his job, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, it's good to be back. It's good to be back, Elliot.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get into this. A murder mystery is going to be so much fun.
Oh, yeah. And we'll have to see if we can figure out who has done it. I believe that's the term, right? Who has done it?
Yeah, that's it.
We'll have to see if we can figure that out next time on Pale Reflections.
Not gonna be lie, I'll be a little disappointed if we figure it out by next week.
Next chapter, we've cracked the case.
Yeah. All right, see ya.
Bye.